So you did a movie.
I did.
So you filmed a movie in Southeast Asia when you were there.
I filmed a movie. Yeah. So, kind of interesting.
That's a cool story. Can you
it is. Yeah, for sure. So I got to do in Asia. I got to do a lot of commercial work. So I did a lot of commercials, things like that. A lot of white tourists, things like that. But I also got to be in a couple of feature films, which was super fun. But the most interesting thing to me came kind of the middle ground of like doing acting, production, and then also doing comedy. So there's a group out of, I think they're kind of based out of Boston, kind of based out of Delhi, India. They're called Mythos Labs. And their whole goal is to basically go to regions that have particular issues, like social change dynamic issues, right? Women's rights, kind of combating extremist ideologies, kind of gender pay, all kinds of things. They cover all kinds of issues. But what they do is they essentially shoot PSAs, but they're not corny. They're not government funded or organized as much. And not that there aren't good ones, of course, but what he does is he finds local talented comics. He tries to find the best comics of the scene who really speak well to that voice of the culture, of the tone, and they really understand like comedy in that region. And then he tasks them to create a project based off a particular issue they're trying to solve. So we went in on this project and we wrote a script for it. It was first draft was written by a guy named Rizman Radzlan, and he's a young comic out of Kuala Lumpur. Absolutely awesome, cool dude. Has an American accent. Grew up in Bahrain. Chinese Muslim, like he's got a whole story. It's great. Classic, like third culture kid. Him, myself, and another very funny experienced comic called Prakash Daniels. We wrote and produced this film called Pak Wick. And the idea behind it is it's a parody of John Wick, but it's fighting the idea of extremist ideology that's infiltrating Malaysia and Indonesia. So we got to do a ton of research on it. But what we found out essentially is that ISIS and other extremist groups are amazing at the advancements they've made in communicating their messages and ideology to young people is just beyond what anyone could have thought it would have ever been. They have like a weekly magazine. They have like video game, like they take video game art and repurpose it.
You want to shout the magazine out?
It's called Inspire Magazine. No, I actually had to get special access to be able to view all this stuff.
Right.
And so there's all the horrible beheadings and stuff like that.
In the magazines.
Well, no, you see everything. So it's basically, they try to scrub all this stuff from the internet, right? Mm-hmm. But people need it for research and for investigations and stuff like that. And so all of this content that gets produced, there's repositories for it, but you have to get access from a guy who works as a liaison with the State Department. Mm-hmm. So you basically get kind of a light security clearance to access to this site. So I'm on every list right now. But yeah, so it's like you can watch all the beheading videos if you're into that. But you can also see like they have a news program with like it's like ISIS doing the weather essentially.
Really,
it is crazy, and it's all typically just insane propaganda of like how they're. But what I really learned is that they have, for all the horrible things that ISIS is doing, like you have to understand what drives that. Like there's this ideology of like, oh, it's black and white. They're just evil. Like that's stupid. Like people are complex individuals, right? Organizations are made of people. And so you have to understand where these grievances have come from, right? You've got multi-generations of people who don't have a good idea of the US, right? From talking about U.S.-backed coups in the Middle East to Arab Spring and things not going your way to drone strikes that took out your family. So now you basically have a vendetta. There's a lot. So everyone has their own ideologies and reasons for doing what they do. But the point is, ISIS is not good. Like, of course, I think no one would disagree with that. But they're going through WhatsApp, they're going through Facebook, they're going through YouTube, and they're pushing all of this content to young kids in places like Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines. So what we wanted to do a cool video that kids would like to watch. Like we're talking teenagers, and it would be funny. And so we got some of the best Malay comics. It's actually in Bahasa Melayu, the local language. And it's a total John Wick thing. But instead of like killing and shooting and stuff like that, it's basically an old Muslim man. And he has to take on these like kind of like motorcycle gang rempits who are stealing donation boxes from the mosques because they're doing it to like try to join ISIS. And it's really fun. It's a great script. It turned out really well. Everyone just turned in awesome performances, and it landed that balance of like kind of serious, but also funny. Like I've always loved Hot Fuzz. And Hot Fuzz is good because it's a parody, but they take the action seriously. Like, they really love those films. John Wick is a huge hit in Malaysia. And so we wanted to have cool action scenes in it. So I actually got a friend I was in an action movie with. He came and did all of our stunt choreography. So I see all these comics. I've only ever seen them on stage, like being silly and funny. And they're having to learn all these just like martial arts moves with this total Brazilian like professional. And it was awesome. And they did a great job. It was really, really cool.
And so the movie was designed to make fun of?
Yeah. So it's basically the idea, there's a lesson learned, right? So all these kids are into it. And so instead of beating up what they call madrumpets, it's like the gang, he like disarms them and then whispers like Quran verses into his ear that are basically like contradictory to what they've been taught to believe.
Right.
So he's basically teaching them through kind of scripture, essentially.
What's it called again?
It's called Pak Wick, which means Uncle Wick.
Uncle Wick. Yeah. Pak Wick. Measures on effectivity, like how?
It's tough, right? So the numbers aren't there on YouTube, but what they do is what is behind the scenes. So, YouTube is, if you've seen Social Dilemma, I think you have, right? You've learned a lot of how the algorithms have run amok. They've kind of gotten a little bit out of their control. And there's definitely efforts now by YouTube and a lot to try to get that under control. Because the problem is you watch one extremist video, there's another one,
just a
there's another
hole,
one,
yeah,
right?
Because it knows what you want.
You like that, so you must like this. And so what they're doing is they're basically injecting these videos into those playlists.
Interesting.
And so
then that'll come up.
Yeah, it's called a redirect, essentially. And so the idea is that you redirect them. And just imagine if someone was looking up like best ways to kill yourself, right? Like a suicide thing. You would hit them with a redirect video that says, oh, you could get help. There's actually hope, whatever. Like, so you're just hitting them with content that's not like so easy to brush off because it makes sense in context, but it helps hopefully, get someone out. And what's really cool is from Mythos, the actual organization, they found people who defected from ISIS or other smaller extremist groups, and they found them in the desert essentially. And the only thing they had in their backpacks was like some water, some very basic supplies, and then flash drives that had some of the videos that they had created.
So what are Mythos creating then? So I know they created the movie, but
yeah, so they do this in
stuff
do similar stuff all over the world, especially in developing nations.
So it sounds like those pamphlet drops that they do in in Africa.
It's a modern day version of that. That's exactly right. Yeah, but the idea is like not just American driven propaganda because this was a collaboration. This film was produced it had some funding from the U.S. State Department, but most of it came from the Southeast Asia Counterterrorism Council. And so it was very much like everyone had a say in it, but like no one was like, the State Department wasn't like, you have to do it like this. We had total creative control over it. If we had gone a really wild direction, I'm sure they would have asked to rein it in, but no, we didn't get told to do it any certain way.
I think that's one of those things that people don't actually know too much about, like how prevalent ISIS is in Southeast Asia. Like,
there's parts of the Philippines that are absolutely
I was going to say, there's
like
a whole city right now that's completely taken over by ISIS, and there's fighting in the streets.
It's reduced significantly in the last few years, but there was, at its height, there were definitely cities that were completely under ISIS control. And they had governments in place, they had essentially a mayor and civic services. And in some places, it's almost, they look like Robin Hood. They were giving money to people. And, it's, again, it's all perspective, right? Totally. From some little town that's been under kind of siege, and then they come in and actually take care of things, and they kind of align with
some
your
money
views.
in. The government's been corrupt, doesn't give you anything. It's similar in like Mexico,
It's an issue. It's so hard to have a really diehard position on it, right? Because it is complex issues, and you have to look at things, and that's why having smart people in the State Department is important. I've always thought. If you go to any American expat Facebook group anywhere, one of the things they're always going to bitch about, especially come April, is taxes. I don't live in the US. I shouldn't have to pay taxes. This is bullshit. To me, if I have to pay the basic level of taxes that I do, which you get a huge exemption for being outside, if I still have to pay taxes as an American to know that if something goes down, the State Department's going to show up, give me shelter, get me on a flight, get me the fuck out at any given time, if that's the insurance I pay for paying taxes to have the State Department at my disposal, done, no problem.
Yeah, but you shouldn't have to do that because New Zealand will do that for you anyway as well, but not charge you taxes.
Yeah, fair enough.
Do you know what I mean?
That's a hugely different perspective growing up in that. But to me, to say being an American, if the standard is you're paying.
You're right. If
to
that's
get
the
this,
standard,
right?
I just think it's a shitty standard.
Yeah,
you know
fair
what
enough.
I mean? Like,
That's cool.
I think any other country, France, the UK, they'll sort you out. You know, because
Yeah.
you're a citizen, and they're not.
It's less pay to play.
I feel like that money grab thing is less about that.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think-
No, totally.
And here's an interesting thing: like, what politician's going to campaign for people overseas not to pay taxes?
Right,
You know,
right,
like,
right.
no way.
No.
You know, that's a dead end. And like, how many of these people are actually voting? It's harder for us to vote in U.S. elections than it is.
Oh, totally.
And there, so we're not going to vote for a politician.
Depending on your states, especially. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
It took me in Georgia. I might just be dumb, but it took me ages to figure that whole process out. Like, it was like a month-long process.
Yeah.
To get I had to apply for the ballot, got on the ballot,
Right.
and then I had to get the papers sent to me, and then I had to resend them out. It's all just so dumb.
At least now, and they may have had this, but I think given this election, you just wanted to make sure, but you actually were able to see that your vote was counted.
I
Yeah.
couldn't tell. Yeah, I have no idea.
Texas, they had that this year, which
Right.
was really nice.
I just fingers crossed. I honestly, like, in my mind, like, I did everything I could.
Have you voted for the runoff yet?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I did. Yeah. Ossoff versus Purdue. Is that right?
Purdue, yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like two pharmaceuticals.
It really does.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
that's-
Which one would you rather take? Ossoff. I'd take Ossoff.
He's the not
He's Democrat,
insider
right?
trading one.
I don't care. Thank you for watching that clip. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that subscribe button on the left. And if you want to watch the full episode, hit the square on the bottom. To watch another small clip, go ahead and hit that square on top. And if you just want to listen to the full episode but don't have time to watch it, you can find this podcast wherever podcasts are listened to. Thanks. Bye.